Oh, I have something. When I look for the mind, I don't find anything. All that there are all the things that you listed, but if you actually try to look and find mind, it doesn't exist. I can't find it. It's like if I try to look for I, who, self, I really don't find anything.
Unfortunately, lack of evidence isn't proof, is it? So we look back at what we're looking out from in Douglas Harding's terms, and we don't see anything. But we do feel a sense of self, don't we? But we look and we can't see whether it's short or tall or, you know, green or blue, or we can't see anything, but we sense it. So there's to me, that's like the primary data of the mind, is the mind once we become self-conscious at age 4 or 5 or whenever that occurs, is that there's a sense of I'm here, but when we look to see that, it jumps around behind us seemingly before we can see it. So we don't see anything. We don't see any movement, we don't hear any noise. But what's not seeing anything, you know? So if we saw something, it would be an object in consciousness. It couldn't be us because we're the subject, right? We're what's conscious in this split. And unless you think it's your neighbor who's conscious of your thoughts and things like that. Some people do, don't laugh. But to me, the simple data is I'm conscious. I may be an appliance. Consciousness appears in the morning, disappears at night. Another form of consciousness appears in dreams. I'm there, right? In fact, the dream dimension is every bit as convincing as this dimension. And it's looser, which is great. You can walk through walls in dreams, right? So Richard Roche used a term, the self, the sense of self. What we're trying to do is to see that. We're trying to observe the observer. And it seems to be an exercise in futility. So there's obviously some paradox involved if it's possible to do that. But, so I forget now why I was getting into that. Something about something. Huh?
Try to see the mind.
Yeah.
Find any evidence that it existed.
Well, yeah. The other. So, and also the idea about existence. Now, to me, the cosmos, including all us critters running around in the cosmos, that this is a vast seeming, and the word existence, I think, fits it exactly. It comes from the Latin to stand outside of. So, to me, all things stand outside of what is. What is what we are at the core. Anything, any object in consciousness exists. It seems, but it stands outside of capital R reality. In mind, to me, I mean, there are 1,000 different definitions of mind. We couldn't get any agreement on that from any group of people, I don't think. But to me, mind is this whole dimension. And our focus is in the mind. It's like we're in an oyster, and we can look around within the oyster and see things, but we're trapped in the oyster is our feeling. So we're trapped in the mind. I don't know if you've ever had that feeling, but it's a dimension of limitations. Everything is known in terms of what it's not. I mean, it's insane. This dimension is insane when you get right down to it. And we feel trapped in this. And so there's an intuition in a way that, like the Rumi poem, I want to go home, that we know we came from a place that didn't have these separations and restrictions. But the tools we have to work with are the mind. So it's the mind, which is a relative, part of the relative dimension or the relative dimension, and what we call our mind, what we can observe, what each of, and so why is it if there's only one awareness, why do we all seem to observe separate things? So I think you almost have to get down to a quantum physics level to get a feeling for that explanation. At this level of vibration, it doesn't make sense. There's only one observer, right? And even when you say one observer, that's so misleading. So impossible to talk about any of this stuff without completely misleading anybody who's listening to it. But there isn't one observer because one would indicate two. So there's observation, and what we're looking for is the source of observation. So I don't know. Didn't answer your question, probably.
I don't know if it was
Just a comment. Yeah. Yeah, I don't see anything when and that's so to me that's it's like doing your homework. You collect a lot of data, but you can't in the mind you can't draw any for sure conclusions. This is all probabilistic. And one of the ways you can describe what we're looking for is certainty, absolute love, absolute security. It doesn't make any, we don't want some of that stuff that's just going to come and go. We want it, the whole thing, right? And so somebody referred to God as the great postulate. And so I like to use the term X, big X. X, what we're looking for is X. And the possibility of finding what we're really looking for, absolute love, absolute certainty, absolute, capital R reality. We don't know. There's no way to know for sure if that's even possible. So it's a big quandary, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So why are you here?
When you spoke about feeling trapped,
Yeah.
I just related that to, I always have this sense of I need to pop out. You know what I mean? Just there's just and it's a very kind of real. I don't know, but it's just I need to pop out. And it's I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's just I feel like I'm, this bubble gum. I always thought I'm stuck to this bubble gum or something. I don't know. It's just so when you said that, I felt that, and I always feel that.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, but.
Yeah, I remember having a very strong feeling that the problem was separation. Was that there was like a membrane around me, and I'd experienced. I don't know if you've experienced this before or not. Rapport with another mind, where two people are. It could feel like two minds watching the same thoughts, feeling the same feelings and things like that, or it could be one mind knowing that the other mind knows that this mind knows that mind. It could be a couple of variations that I've experienced. But when you do have those experiences, if they lasted, they'd be wonderful. They don't last, but they're a clue, I think. And so I had the feeling, trying to find unconditional love. There was a feeling if you could find your soulmate and get them inside the same membrane with yourself, that would really help. That would expand the membrane. But there'd still be a membrane there, wouldn't there? And what we're looking for is to get out of the trap, basically out of the trap of existence, of this restriction. And it's not that existence is a problem. It's the problem is that we're identified with it. Yeah, I'm the body here, and so if you, one of the ways to attack this is to you split the insane world into some set of opposites, like up and down. So are your feet up or are they down right now?
Depends on your reference.
Yeah. So what is your reference? Where are your feet up or down right now? Okay. So that represents a paradigm of how we're looking at existence. So, and that's the ordinary one that we're socialized into. That you could say it's like what the what do you call these things? Eyeball horizon, not mental horizon, but the visual horizon separates up and down. And so this is my dividing line between up and down. So if the feet are down, but if my paradigm that I'm looking through the world at is one that Douglas Harding suggested, what I am is down, and anything in the view is up. So in that case, when I'm looking the net with that paradigm, through that pair of glasses, you could say, feet are definitely up. I used to like to tease Sean Evans about that because I don't think he ever agreed that feet were up. Yeah, but I think a lot of people also they confuse different paradigms, and they'll put things together that are the views from two different paradigms, not realizing that they're not keeping a separate a dividing line between them. But so another way to divide the universe is inside outside. And I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, there's no inside and outside. Everything's outside," or whatever. Everything. So the paradigm that Richard Rose suggested people work with was the unknown that you're looking for. The self is inside. The unknown, the unseen, the seer, the unseen seer, is inside. Anything in the view is outside. And to me, that's an excellent paradigm to work with. And as more and more comes into the view, for example, the belief in being a doer, as more and more of the mental operation comes into the view, it starts to loosen up these beliefs about what we are. So we don't have to trade old beliefs in for better ones. In fact, that just makes it becomes, that's going to happen, but the problem becomes more and more abstract. So basically, what I believe has to happen is that the beliefs we have, you could say they're faulty, or they're just, limited. They're not the real truth. They have to loosen up somehow so that we can start to observe without being completely convinced of what we're seeing things through these particular beliefs. So the inside-outside way of dividing the world, that paradigm, when I came, so I've been trying to work that paradigm to pare down my self-definition of what I believe myself to be, to see through. And so basically the whole path to truth is one of disillusionment. So if you try to build a better and better theory of the truth, good luck. It's not going to work. It may be necessary to go through that. Who knows? Each mentality has its own thing, and but the progress is all made by disillusionment, and sometimes it's going to be painful, but not always. But when things loosen up, there's a relaxation that goes along with it too. So. But when I met Douglas Harding, which was, 20 some years after I'd been working with Rose, his paradigm was almost the opposite. It was like all things are within. And so in the Rose paradigm, things are outside. The unseen me is inside. In the Harding paradigm, all things are within. And my mind could flip to that paradigm very easily and see, my God, that's we're looking at it in this way. That's absolutely, not absolutely, but it's actually the conclusion from looking at things through Harding's paradigm. And I think in my case, it's exactly what I needed, because my mind could flip back and forth, seeming like when you look at a Necker cube. You know what the Necker cubes are? They're line drawings of cubes. And you can see them on a lot of websites. And if you look at them, they'll flip back and forth from you're seeing the inside of the cube to seeing the outside of the cube, the inside. So, yeah. So to me, the Harding paradigm and the Rose paradigm, my mind could flip back and forth, seemingly at will, but you have to put a question mark after will, don't you? But that's a very disconcerting situation for the mind to be in. So the mind wants to grab onto some conclusion and then go back to sleep. And when you've got two equally true ways of looking at something, it's a problem for the mind. And so I think that in my case, that was something that was very productive, something to loosen up, what I was grabbing onto. And so to me, we're seemingly stuck in this oyster, and everything we see inside the oyster, the world. But the thing we don't really perceive is that there has to be a little hole somewhere in the oyster for the light to get through. And what we are is we're not in the oyster. We're back behind the oyster, watching through the hole in the oyster when light's coming through. I mean, that's a crude way to express it, but anyway.
I was kind of struck with your oyster metaphor for the mind.
Yeah.
And you probably know this, but in very early development, like around age 2, there's a very common expression to depict what's going on. And it's called "the world is your oyster."
I've heard that term. Yeah, I didn't know that's.
Yeah,
Mhm.
just in love with all of
Yeah, right.
So when you talked about the mind, there's a paradox in your oyster metaphor for me. One is, yeah, I'd like to get out of this mind oyster. The other part of it is, there's a part of me that's in love
Sure.
with it. Does this make sense?
Yeah, we if the movie weren't interesting, we wouldn't keep watching it, right? There's got to be enough drama in life to keep our focus here. Yeah. So I guess maybe the continuation that I'd sort of lost the track of. I was going to say, so like feeling we're trapped in an oyster. The mind to me is sort of like a fist, and when certain circumstances arise, which you could call surrender, you could call dying, you could call giving up, the mind opens up. And in my experience, looking back on my life, the mind opens only as far as you pare down your self-definition. So the second time I died, it was a near-death drowning experience. And what I saw when I gave up, I flailed. I got caught in a riptide, didn't even know what a riptide was. And I thought, holy shit, I'm going to Hawaii, and I don't want to go to Hawaii. And so I was flailing my arms and legs as fast as I could to keep from going to Hawaii. And eventually they just became like noodles. The muscles just weren't working anymore. And I surprised myself. I just relaxed. The struggle was over when I admitted to myself, well, these muscles aren't working anymore. And so what I got was a life review, which you hear about was near drowning. And so that must be something similar that happens with a lot of people when they have a near drowning experience. But yeah, so my feeling based on what's on my life is the mind opens at points of surrender. Even when you fall in love, when you fall in love, to me, that's the ego is out of the spotlight. So in a way, it's like a surrender too. And to me, it's great data for the mind to have. That the problem is not the ego, but the problem is the ego being in the spotlight. And all the stuff the mind does is doing its job. Thoughts aren't a problem. Feelings aren't a problem. The mind's doing its job, which in a mundane way is basically survival. Maybe not even survival, certainly not individual survival, but individual survival to a certain point. And to me, the process that's at work for that there are really, say, two processes. One is the decision-making process, and the other is what I refer to as intuition. I don't know if it's the same thing other people refer to as intuition, but to me, the decision-making process is an emotional process. It's a set of fears and desires that we didn't choose when we were 2 years old. They just come along with the equipment, and they're arguing for what they want. And so usually the fears and desires, they can't get their own way all the time, but they'll group with other fears and desires to form little sets of alliances. Yeah. And when I saw this working in slow motion, I realized, my God, this is such a primitive thing. What wins is the side that makes the most noise. Like in a tug of war, the side that's got the most muscle. Yeah. And so to me, but that's part of the mind's operation. It's doing its thing. It's doing the right thing. And then the intuition process to me is one that works with, I assume, all the data from our life experiences. Like the whole life experience goes into a database that our intuition works with. And it's working in the background. I mean, I was never particularly conscious of it at work. I think when you hear and talk to people when, say, like the quarterbacks on football teams, when they realize, my God, this stuff's happening faster than I could think it through, my reactions. And when the musicians, like the jazz musicians, when they get in the groove, and people in the zone in different ways, I think they're becoming conscious of the intuition process at work when they realize that. And to me, intuition processes feelings, but it's not a feeling-based process. It processes thoughts, feelings, our whole life experience. And it's trying to, and to me, that for somebody who's in a conscious search, what they want to do is encourage the intuition to focus on the big problem. So if we're hungry, if the intuition's at work, it's going to try to find out where the closest yogurt is, or whatever. And whatever's in our face, the intuition's ought to be working on. But if we can encourage it somehow, maybe by setting aside time where we just postpone distraction, encourage the intuition to focus on the big problem, which, geez, I don't know about you, but I think, for everybody, it's basically survival. And we're talking about immortality type survival, not, if you jump from this to however you might describe this dimension here to what you think of as heaven. In heaven, you get every wish granted as soon as it occurs. That would drive you nuts. You'd want hell if you had that. I mean, how long would you want that?
For eternity.
Yeah. Yeah. So we can get into a little bit to the idea about meditation too, because I think there are 1,000 different ideas about meditation, and possibly different types of meditation that are important and helpful at different times in our progression, But to me, so what's important is and what puts the mind at rest is finding what we truly are, and that's what is referred to sometimes as self-realization, essence realization. Richard Rose used the term "observe the observer." I borrowed the term somewhere for the subtitle of my second book is "Transcending the Split Between Knower and Known." So all those things are sort of synonyms for pointing at something that's beyond duality. And so using the description of observing the observer, which is something the mind can think about. I'm trying to find myself, right? When I sit down to meditate, I'm trying to find the observer. And there are different people who have recommended practices of doing that. But to me, what's going to happen if you pursue it is you're going to realize it's not going to happen. In other words, you within the mind, it's not going to happen, and that's all we can conceive of. We can't conceive of something beyond the mind. In other words, the mind can't conceive of something. It's like you can't undo yourself, So if you have some kind of a working set of words, what you're trying to do. So mine that I borrowed from Rose was when I saw clearly what I really, really wanted. The words that fit that description were, "I want to become the truth." And my studying math, the strange things I realized from my whole mentality was sort of oriented. My love of math was a love of, until you get way in the advanced, some of the advanced areas of math, you can find an answer. There's an answer to every problem. And there's also great beauty in the way you get to the answer. So it's aesthetic, but I had a love of truth at a very low relative level. And so the idea of an abstract love of truth just fit my mentality for some reason. But that's just me, everybody's going to have their own feelings about what they're searching for and how to go about it. And I think the only I didn't feel I was intuitive. The only thing I had to work with was my conceptual thinking, and but I could also, I knew I was feeling my way in the dark the whole time. So I think some mentalities that were more oriented toward the feeling side of what's going on, some toward the thinking side of what's going on. So my idea about what productive meditation is becoming more observant. And you know, a silly example of that is when I go grocery shopping, I only see the stuff I've bought in the past. I mean, there are tons and tons of things in the grocery store that I don't get, and I think, well, I'd like to find something new, but I don't see that stuff, you know. So there's a huge difference between what we're seeing and what we're noticing. And so productive meditation to me is becoming more observant. And there are a lot of things we could talk about becoming more observant, but it's, so the idea of, throughout history, apparently a lot of apparently self-realized big guns have said thought has to stop. I found that wasn't the case with me. That thought continued like in peripheral vision, but there was still mental movement there. And I realized at the time, this was in my run up to the breakthrough, you know, I realized at the time it's not interfering with direct observation. And the only other know-it-all that I've come across, you know, his writings I've come across, who I think probably had a mentality similar to mine, was Franklin Merrill Wolff. And he talked about, so he was a mathematician, and he talked about the mind as a manifold. And so he also found that thought didn't need to stop in order for the final breakthrough to occur. So thought, to me, thought is not the problem. Being caught up in it is a problem. I saw something, I found a book. So most of my reading these days, I can't stand spiritual stuff. So I pick up books on the new bookshelf at the library. I also read detective fiction, which I loved as a kid, and I'm back to that now. But the new bookshelf at the library has the best stuff. I mean, psychology, autobiographies, and all sorts of good things. And one of the books I picked up recently was called Why Can't I Meditate? And it was a book about this thick. It was written, put together by a British guy, and he was going into a lot of research about mindfulness is basically looking at different types of mindfulness meditation. And over in England, apparently in some of the high schools, they teach mindfulness meditation to kids. They'll do like an 8-week course and stuff like that. And one of the descriptions I came across there, I thought was dynamite. And they were telling the kids, so it's like the next step after. So in order to be more observant, you have to be able to observe mind movement with some detachment, not getting lost in everything that you're seeing. But to me, you could observe the mind like that indefinitely and not get the shock that the mind needs to pop out. Yeah. Uh-huh. And so the second element to me is one of discernment, is that you watch what's going on with some detachment and also with some discernment. And what they were teaching these kids in somebody's, I don't know who was doing it, but one of these mindfulness courses is think about each thought that comes into the mind. And they're using thought the same way I do, is not just a thinking thought, but any mind movement. It could be a feeling, could be a picture, it could be a word. To me, when worded thoughts come into the mind, it's like we're kids who haven't learned to read without vocalizing what we read yet. So it's not like we hear words, we're actually seeing pictures of the words and then vocalizing them. I don't know, that just could be my insanity too. But anyway, so what they were telling the kids is, imagine each thought that you see, each thought that appears is like a bus pulling into your bus stop. And you can either choose to get on the bus if it appears that the bus is going in your direction, which I think is key, or you wait for the next bus. And to me, that's exactly what Rose was talking about. So the way he termed it was, you remind yourself of your direction or your objective. So like in my case, it was this feeling of, you know, all the feelings. And I think it's actually important to feel the feelings of what you want. But the words were helpful to me too, for becoming the truth in my case. So it's easy to lose track of why, like even for somebody who's got a regular meditation practice, it's easy to lose track of why you're meditating. And so to me, the best thing by far would be when you sit down to meditate or walk or whatever you do, lie down and sleep, you know, when you get started, is to feel the feeling of why you're there in the first place. The same like coming to one of these meetings. So most of our life is just sleepwalking, you know. And if there's a little break, a little glitch in the matrix, and you start to, you think to ask yourself, well, why am I here? What am I looking for? To me, that's extremely valuable. And then the way Rose termed that technique was you remind yourself of what you're looking for, and then you watch what comes into the mind. If it doesn't seem to be relevant to what you're looking for, you turn your head away from it and wait to see what comes in next. So it's not like a mantra. It's not like substituting, you know, a better thought for the thought or whatever. It's exactly what these folks were talking about in terms of the bus stop. The buses coming into the bus stop. That was really good. How are we doing for time?
You got a long time to go yet.
Mm-hmm.
You're fine, keep going.
Well, yeah,
Good.
I want to keep rambling until I want, you know, take maybe 5 minutes or so at the end to cover something particular. Could you give me a warning? Could somebody give me a warning when it's
The
get?
clock is right behind you, but I don't have an agenda. I don't even know what the next thing, what time.
There is a clock there, isn't it? See how I talked about noticing what you're seeing?
You got another hour.
Lunch is at 12:30. Lunch is at 12:30. Yep, till 12.
Oh, we got lots of time, don't we? Okay, so if you're not going to talk, I'm going to have to challenge you. So what do you want? Huh?
Do we need the microphones for folks that want to ask you questions or not? If we're not going to. We do need microphone for folks to ask you
Or
questions?
you can repeat the question.
You
Yeah, you
speak
can
up.
just repeat the question.
Just speak up. It's a smaller space. I think. Should be fine.
I agree. We've been getting questions so far, yeah.
Good.
I
Okay.
have a question about meditation, Art.
Okay.
And I've asked this to others. It hasn't been helpful so far. But after decades of being at it and really following the procedure that you mentioned in
Uh-huh.
this book, there are long periods where, and I don't know any other way to describe it, there aren't any thoughts. I haven't been trying to get rid of them. This just happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm staring into, I have to say, blankness, nothingness. It's not bliss. It's
Mhm.
not. It's not anything.
I didn't have that problem, so I really don't.
But it is a problem.
Yeah.
It also feels like it's somewhat of a dead end in terms of what I want.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you remember what you're looking for, an absence of thoughts isn't necessarily a problem, but it just goes on indefinitely if you're not seeing anything. So if nothing's popping up on the screen, then you're not going to see what you're looking for, are you?
No.
Basically, what it takes is something has to pop up that contradicts a belief that you're holding on to. And so if nothing's popping up, it may be relaxing or it may be frustrating, but eventually, if that just goes on indefinitely, it's not going to.
Well, it's not like I never have thoughts when I'm meditating, but there are these long periods, and it feels like, I'll use your terminology for
Mhm.
this, that's what's popping up. It's a problem. You know, I don't. Usually we think of, well, you know, you're not having thoughts. That's a good thing. It doesn't feel necessarily like a good thing. It
Yeah.
feels more like this is a block, or
Could be, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's no way to know for sure. I also have the feeling that there's no wasted information in our life experience. So it may be important data that's getting logged. And You know that all our actions are reactions to irritation. So if the mind gets irritated by that, by those intervals, it will react to it.
Lack of irritation.
Yeah.
What? Maybe there's a lack of irritation. I was going to suggest maybe you consider starting an argument with Ann.
I don't have to work at that.
Not that off recording.
Yeah.
You know, I can relate to what you're saying. You know, for me, that was like kind of like when I became aware of the space. So there's like this place that's like, but it's not it. You know what I mean? I intuitively know that, like, so I almost feel like it's a sense of disassociation. That, you know, life is so painful that I disassociate.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so I mean, that's just because it is. It's just like everything is.
Mm-hmm. Well, it could be restful too. So it just depends on the mind's reaction to it, doesn't it? That it could be a rest break to have no thoughts.
I'd say it is more restful. I don't feel dissociated. I would say restful's not too far off, but there's also the sense that
Something's not right. There's more.
I mean, I certainly don't have the idea, well, this is it, I've arrived.
Right.
I know that, and yet it seems like almost like, I'll use another metaphor, almost like this is a wall. I got to get through that wall to get for what I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
What are you looking for?
I'm looking for want of a better way, the truth. I want to become the truth. I want to understand with a capital U.
How do you know that's not the truth?
Huh?
How do you know that's not the truth?
Because it leaves questions unanswered. And I don't have the sense of a certainty that this is it by any means. In fact, just
But there's this intuitive sense that this is not it.
yeah, I don't have any.
And what if, like, I mean, like when you say what are you looking for, like I used to think I was looking for God or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like anymore, I have no freaking idea. Like I really have no idea. You know, truth. What the heck does that mean? You know, there's just.
It gets back to a feeling, Mary Beth. There's a feeling, a longing, a yearning. And sometimes the mind reacts, it's being painful to feel the feeling, especially if it seems out of reach. But so to me, the word want, it means there's a feeling that something's missing.
Yeah, there's a sense that.
Yeah.
You're just like you need to pop out of this. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's more.
Right.
But it's not like I know what I'm looking for or that I'm looking for this. Or,
No, it doesn't. No. In fact, if you can conceive of it, it's not going to be it. Yeah. So knowing what you're looking for doesn't mean you got a picture of what you're going to find. So it's more the missing side, the feeling of what's missing, without knowing what's going to solve the problem. And so lots of times the closest thing we can get to is something we've experienced that's been like a positive experience. And so we'll say we want more of that. So I want more happiness and less suffering, right? So at one level that's accurate. But if we're really honest with ourselves, we don't want more happiness. We want complete happiness. We don't want love that doesn't last. We want love that's unending and unconditioned, and, you know. So in Larry, what you're talking about, I think that the factor we weigh by is whether we're fully satisfied. So if seeing blankness fully satisfies us, then geez, that's great, congratulations, right? if seeing the blankness doesn't fully satisfy us, then there's still something we're looking for that we haven't found.
Well, that's for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think it comes down to satisfaction in a way, but that's just one way of looking at it.
But satisfaction of this realm can be very transient. And I can't say
Not satisfaction. So
No,
I'm using it with a big S.
You're using it with a big S. I'm
Yeah.
using it as a little s.
Yeah.
I'm saying that after 35 years of meditating,
Mm-hmm.
to have these periods with no thoughts, there's some satisfaction in that.
Uh-huh.
That's not the same
Right.
as having the satisfaction of this is it.
It's not fully satisfying.
No.
No. Mm-mm.
That is kind of like memory, if you think about it, like you don't know what it is, but like, this isn't it. You know what I mean? So like, and you intuitively, so like you say you forget something, but oh, is this it? No, that's not it. So as soon as it presents itself, then like this is it.
I go through the alphabet trying to think, is it something that begins with an A, something that begins with a P?
But so then there's this sense that like this isn't it. Like there's this
Yeah.
sense that
Right. Yeah, I refer to that as a truth sensor. I think the mind has a truth sensor, and I think it functions more reliably in some mentalities than it does in other mentalities. That some people latch onto things and then realize that's not it. Whereas other people are more cautious. It might also be. I remember one time a friend of mine said the difference between his mind and my mind was that. So he was like the intuitive mind. I was the conceptual mind, and he said I pop up above the clouds frequently and then back down, up and down, and I lose sight of what I saw. And he says, everything moves forward very, very slowly over the whole terrain or whatever. And once you see something, it's there. And so different mentalities, the intuition works differently, we pick up things differently. So even trying to compare notes, I mean, it's useful to get comparisons to. It's like the idea of specialness. Oh, so I got something I can throw out here. Maybe this was a Nisargadatta quote that I love because it's not what people usually think of as Nisargadatta. My pages are sticking together. Is that a sign? Here it is. So he says, use your mind. Remember, observe, you are not different from others. Most of their experiences are valid for you too. So, that's not our default way of thinking, is it? That we're special, either special positive, we'd like special positive, we'll take special negative. I mean, we have the conviction that we're separate. So to be separate, you got to be different, right? And so you got to be either plus or minus. So he said, you are not different from others. Most of their experiences are valid for you too. Think clearly and deeply. Go into the entire structure of your desires and their ramifications. They are a most important part of your mental and emotional makeup and powerfully affect your actions. Remember, you cannot abandon what you do not know. To go beyond yourself, you must know yourself. Don't you like that better than my guru told me that I was all that in a bag of chips, I was that, and all you have to do is just believe it. But I think Nisargadatta actually did the work. Yeah.
Well, he uses words like effort and earnestness as much, or
Yeah.
Earnest as much as the word effortless.
Yeah. Yep. So we all love Nisargadatta. We wouldn't possibly think of disagreeing, but what do you think? Was he right? He might have been wrong. So when he focused on desires, well, what about fears? The flip side of the coin. Are they as important, less important, more important? So
Fear's just a turnaround design.
Uh-huh.
What'd you say?
It says fear's just moving away from the
Yeah, so when I met Douglas Harding, I think it was the second time I met him. So I had signed up for a Douglas Harding workshop years before that, and it turned out in the workshop he used to come to the U.S. once a year and do it on the West Coast one year, and then the East Coast the other year. Maybe it was twice a year, and the West Coast one time, the East Coast. But anyway, so I'd signed up for a workshop that he put on that was going to be in New Jersey. And it turned out it was canceled because that was in the fall, and that summer he'd on a summer retreat that he did every year at Salisbury, he'd fallen down the steps because he was impatient or something, and his doctor said, "No more long airplane rides for you, buddy." So he still had retreats, or these workshops. He called them workshops in Britain and Europe, but I didn't want to go through one of those. I thought, oh, geez, I don't want to go through a whole workshop. I just want to meet the guy and talk to him, So I emailed, and at that point, he was in his early 90s, so he wasn't doing the emailing, but his wife would do the communications for him. And so they invited me to come over. I said, can I just come over and visit you? And they invited me to come over. And the first time I was there on the Sunday before I was getting ready to leave, he got some of the local, there were a couple people within, not close by, but within in the same part of England, students to come in, and he put on a mini workshop for me because I was too, whatever, to want to attend one of the regular workshops. And so the second time when I went over, I wasn't planning to go that soon. It was just a couple months later, but a couple of the students at in Pittsburgh, Carnegie Mellon University, wanted to meet him, and so I wrote and asked could they come over and meet you, and didn't get any answer, which was strange because he and I both felt like as soon as we spent any time around each other, we'd known each other forever. We were family, it was one of those things. And so I wrote back and I said, well, how about if I come over with him? And then I heard right away, yeah, come on over. So I went back a second time a few months after the first visit, and again he put on a workshop for us, while we were there. And after the workshop, he asked us what our reactions were and stuff like that. And so both Jeff and Kippy said what their reactions were, and I just was trying to hide in my seat, And so finally, he poked me and said, well, what do you think? And I said, I don't have any trouble with any of this stuff, except there's still too much of me here. And he was ordinarily a very quiet-spoken person with a hell of a good sense of humor, but he hit the edge of his chair like this, and he says, the only thing that's in your way is pride. And I said, I didn't know that. I said, I see I've got a lot of fear, but I'm not. And so I think pride and fear and desire, those things, mentalities tend to focus on one side of the coin rather than the other. And so somebody saying to me, your problem is pride, well, that was a shock. Because I was so familiar with all my fears, but pride's, no, I don't got any of those. And it might be the same with fears and desires, like when Mr. Gadada is pointing out, you got to focus on your desires. Maybe that was his mentality, and somebody else may need to, is always focused on their desires and needs to see the flip side, or who knows. So we all agree with Mr. Gadada, right? So he didn't mention beliefs, he didn't mention prides. And but the basic question comes back to, how do you know what you need to look into? So if somebody says what you got to do is focus on desires, is that right? If somebody says stand on your head, is that right? How do you know what you need to do? Don't just nod, what's the answer? Yeah, I agree.
It seems to me it's all 20/20 hindsight. You know after you know.
Yeah, but that's too late, isn't it? Yeah, so it's like, suppose like with Bernadette Roberts, she went into the Disc House Carmelite Nuns when she was 18 years old, and she was there until age 25. She had a cosmic constant unitive experience. She decided that's as far as anybody's talking about stuff, so I'm leaving. If she stuck around one more day, she might have had the breakthrough she had at age 56 or whatever it was, 59. But, so if we pursue anything, how would we know if we don't do it one more day? It might give us what we want. It's a crapshoot, isn't it?
Thanks a lot.
No? Yeah. There have to be parallel lives running, so we could determine if we made this decision. Here's what happened. Uh-huh.
But doesn't that imply that we're in control?
Well, so that's a good question, isn't it?
We're not in control.
Well, are you sure? See, so even when you watch the operation of the mind, you can see these, like the decision making process running without you poking your fingers in there, and yet still there's bound to be a feeling. Well, but maybe I influence things indirectly, and I think there's something to that. I think it's like our emotions eventually. It's like an ocean liner that needs to get turned around, and I think our feelings can actually get that ocean liner turned around. But I can't prove that to myself or anybody else.
It's not like that just because that we have so much control.
No. What we're talking about is the decision-making process. Now, there's a decision-making process at work, right? Whether we're doing it or not. So something is deciding, yes, I'll do this, or no, I won't do it. So somebody says, stand on your head. That's how you get more blood to your head. Then do 6 Hail Marys or whatever the thing is. And if it makes sense to your intuition, you'll try it. If it doesn't, then you won't, right?
Well, whatever happens is going to happen.
Well, how do you know that whatever's going to happen is going to happen?
I don't.
Yeah. So looking back, you can say, well, yeah, things couldn't have been any different, right? But we're talking about living forward. If there is, since we seem to be living in time, we're talking about the next decision that gets made, the next action that's taken or not taken.
I think the reason it makes sense to me that we're not in control is in looking back.
In looking back, yeah.
What has happened in my life up to this point.
It's hard to imagine it being any different, right?
Given the circumstances and events at the time,
Yeah.
my level of development at the
Right.
time,
Right.
things could not have happened any differently.
Sure.
Therefore,
Yeah.
I don't see how it could be any different going forward.
Well, so that's a conceptual conclusion, but what's your feeling about that?
That same thing.
No, it's not. Different from having no sense of control.
Yeah. I can't imagine that anything that I do in the future or don't do in the future, I can't imagine that it could be any different
So you're fatalistic.
than it's going to be.
Yeah. So that's, and to
Because I
me,
will be doing
so
the
you're,
very best I can.
now wait a second. You're talking about imagination. Get down to the feeling level, the child level.
I can't.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's very difficult for some of our mentalities. My mentality is much like that. In fact, I think I spent a tremendous amount of energy repressing feelings because they threatened to be overwhelming. That's one of the things I see now is I can afford to feel any feeling as deeply as possible because I know there's no vulnerability at the core. But until that happens, then a lot of us can't afford to feel feelings. My whole defense, my whole personality built up about not feeling feelings. Again?
Well, you started to talk about the ocean liner in regards to feelings. Is that it seems like that's sort of the same as getting back to that childhood.
Well, yes. Well, yeah. So my feeling, my conclusion, or whatever you could say, is that there's no way to know whether we may be able to affect things indirectly. Even when you can see you're not running the decision-making process, who knows? So there's nothing you can know for sure except what you are. And that's not mind knowing. That's the type of knowing the mind's not familiar with. And so any mind knowing, if you're sure about it, you're in deep doo-doo. So that's, I was mentioning the other day, that's why I think one of the biggest mistakes a know-it-all can make is looking back at their life and saying, oh, this is what helped, this is what got me there. Even if what got them there was making $1 billion, you know, how could they possibly know that this is what helped and this is, because generally failures are what wake us up. And businessmen who make a lot of money, usually they go through a lot of failures to make big bucks, you know. And so, but when you look back, you probably wouldn't say, oh, I love failing, you know, I can't wait to fail some more and stuff like that. Yeah, so if somebody looks back and says, oh, this is what got me there, and then even worse, they say, oh, I know if you do this, it'll get you there. Holy mackerel.
Well, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but it sounds like that you're saying that we're doing the living.
The doership is a function of where your observation platform is. So when I was a young father, all three of my kids just loved to swing when they were little kids. And so when I'd get home from work, I'd end up spending an hour or two, if it wasn't snowing or whatever, you know, out pushing the kid on the swing. And so if one of my neighbors had said, are you doing that? I would have said, what, are you nuts? Of course I'm doing that. Look at me, I'm doing this, right? So at that time, my viewing position was, I'm the body, you know, I'm doing all this stuff. I'm making my arms move. Yeah, nobody's doing that, I'm doing it. But at some point, when you see more of the process of the mind going on, you realize, well, that doing is happening, but I didn't make a decision to do that, because decisions tumble out on their own. And even before I even become conscious of the decision to move this muscle, there was already a message sent to that muscle from the brain, right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, but then you said that, how do I know that I'm not?
X, it doesn't make any difference what, it's how do you know X? So if you know something for sure, you're not considering all the possibilities. What we're talking about is probabilistic, right? So anything the mind cooks up is probabilistic. We look at the trajectory of how things have been going and we project the future based on that. But it's probabilities, it's not certainty. And so that's where we get locked up, is when we know something. We don't know anything for sure. There is no certainty in this dimension.
So did you know that you were not doing the pushing of the swing? Did you know that?
Oh, so now I wouldn't say I was doing that. It depends on who I was talking to, because you put it in context too, right? But so it depends on the viewing position, where you're watching things happening from. And if you can see that things are just happening in what you believe yourself to be isn't involved in it. And so it gets a little complicated, doesn't it? So if you ask me, are you a person? So are you a person? What's your feeling about it? Are you a person?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah. So I know I'm not a person.
So I get it.
Yeah. But I don't try to, you know, it'd be stupid to go to the grocery store and say, hey, I'm not a person. What do you got for sale? You know?
That'll be
Yeah, so the best friend of any searcher is doubt. This is another thing that I got strongly from my teacher, from Richard Rose, is that doubt is the path. So the whole path is the via negativa. You don't get a better and better knowledge of what you're looking for, or better and better understanding, or better and better view. You get less and less certainty. You back away from untruth. And then you possibly get to a wall like Larry has, and you know, the mind doesn't know what to do about that. So either you hit a wall or an abyss. If you start looking down the abyss, the mind will react to it. You know, if you back up to a blank wall, you don't find any doors or windows, you get frustrated. But the mind can't do the whole job. But to me, the work is paring down our faulty beliefs about what we are until we get to the ones we can't pare down anymore for ourselves. And then something has to provide the shock, the opposition to that.
So if you're like resting in or trying to rest in that not knowing, how does that translate into intuitively choosing actions? Where to go, what to do with what's in front of you right now?
Well, the idea of resting in the unknowing to me doesn't make sense. It's irritating. So you rest in knowing. Unknowing is irritating.
Maybe the resting is not a good word.
Okay.
There's a kind of settling.
I believe it's helpful if we become conscious of intuition, which I wasn't particularly. I think it's helpful as you become, like you could say, listening is hearing intuition. It's at work, and it's very possible that it works better if you're more conscious of it. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I don't think it's going to be harmful anyway. Yeah, but so the way intuition affects the decision making is questionable too. So you'll see yourself reacting the same way over and over and over to the same situation, and then something may change that. And what has to change is the weighting of who's making the most noise. And to me, one of the factors that changes that is the voice of intuition that comes in. It's not a noisemaker, but somehow it seems to be able to change the weighting of the various fears and desires. And so I don't know if you've ever tried it, but if you become disgusted at the way you react to a certain situation, that you always react that way. Either somebody pushes your button and you get angry and become an assertive asshole or whatever, bleep that out. And or you give in, you accommodate somebody else and they're not honest and stuff like that. But so if you've ever watched what happens is if the mind gets to the point of being really unhappy with a reaction pattern, there may be a decision that's made to change the reaction pattern. And then you watch and see sometimes it'll actually work and other times it won't work. If it works, then we pat ourselves on the back and say, oh, I got willpower, So that may be the closest to will that the mind exerts, is that reaction. All mental action is reaction. Yeah, so you keep your fingers crossed. But intuition isn't perfect. It's a relative process that's working with relative data. And so you keep your fingers crossed that as it gets more data, it comes up with better conclusions. And in a way, I think that's actually what happens is that if the focus is on X, on something with a capital letter, and the intuition has time to work on it, that you'll get better and better answers as more life experience accumulates. So I think there's a reason why it's not likely that a 10-year-old is going to hit self-realization. That the intuition actually needs life experience to do better and better computations on the big picture, the big problem.
Does do you think that grace and intention plays a part in that? In, intuition?
I had a dream one time when Ramana Maharshi was lying on like a train like the platform of a train station, and I was down in the what do you call where the train tracks run? Well, so the platform is up 4 feet above the ground level, right, where the rails are. So I was down in the gully where the rails ran, and he was up reclining on the platform up there. And so I was complaining to him about grace, and he said, and then the dream, the rut where the train tracks were started filling with water, and it came up and up and up. And pretty soon I was standing on my tiptoes trying to keep my nose above the water. He says, "You're always up to your nose in grace." So I think grace does play a role, but it's not something you work. It's like humility, for example. You can't work. It's like Benoit, Hubert Benoit, the French psychiatrist, said it's the way, but it's not a way. So yeah, so I'd say grace is like that too. Yeah, we're dependent on grace.
What about intention?
Well, it depends on your mentality. So I know many people who have many good intentions.
If my intention is to travel from here to California, never having been there,
Uh-huh.
and play out my intuition,
Uh-huh.
is grace involved in that at all? To give me some guidance?
Well, I don't know in a specific situation like that what you would say is intuition's processing of your life experience and what might be coming from another source. So when you get down to the very end of the road, Rose had a very strong feeling about it. I had a very strong feeling in my case too, that something lined up everything in a way that there was no way I could have done with my machinery, with the machinery of this, the mind. Mm-hmm. And so who knows how much of that's happening all the time. Yeah, I don't know. But the product would be the intuitional computation. And so, so if we follow our intuition, the thing is, knowing that it's not a perfect process, it's a relative process, we still need to try to check it with our common sense. So if
My intuition, if my intention is to really grasp the message that you're giving,
uh-huh.
that's my intention. Well done.
Okay.
I'm trying to put it in my mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to me, it's a parallel to expectation. I think it's good to have intention, to be conscious of having intention. The same with expectation. A lot of people, as we get more sophisticated, we realize that's a way to hide from shocks, from disappointment. And so many of the more sophisticated people that I talk to, they'll say, "Oh no, I don't have any expectations. I come without any expectations." And I think, yeah, well, it's a good way to try to protect yourself from disappointment. So actually, if you came here wanting to end the search, that would be one thing. But also, you talk to many people, and if you ask them if they consider seriously if right this moment you could have the breakthrough that you're looking for, not knowing what to expect, whether it's going to be plus or minus or anything, but if you could have what you're looking for, would you take it? And I think 90% of the people would say, not quite yet,
Don't you think if you were saying yes, you would? I mean, there's just this sense in me that the moment.
No, you can't. So you can't force.
Truly, from your heart, if you really.
No, you can't force it. No, I think saying yes sends a good message to our inner self, you could say. But it's like when Buddha sat down under the Bodhi tree. There's no way he could have said, "I'm going to sit here until I get enlightened." That would not work. So somebody concocted that story after the fact to make it sound good.
I thought that's what happened.
No, try it sometime.
Yes, but then you're not really saying yes. What I'm saying is that in the essence of if you truly,
Well, in surrender, so let's say, to me, the only time I prayed was when I felt really backed into a corner. And so the mind knows whether something like a prayer is honest, right? Heartfelt. So when I prayed for help, I found it shocked me. It was immediately available and could completely blast any adversity. I had no idea that there was that power inside me. But, I didn't set up the conditions to feel that so Bob Ferguson said, don't you know you're always backed into a corner? I said, yeah, I can't really deny that. But the feelings got to the point at certain times where I'd pray for help, But that help didn't get me all that I wanted at that point, but there was a response. So you don't.
I think there's always, because I'm certainly, since I just lost my daughter, there's this idea. When I had lost another friend in the same hospital to leukemia, my best mate, my maid on a relative, like 20 years before.
Huh.
And so it was kind of like deja vu.
Yeah.
I remember praying and believing in prayer and believing in God and just believing that He would save her.
Well,
she didn't. She died.
That's not an honest prayer.
But that was my thought 20 years ago. So this time, I'm going through all of this, and there really truly was an expectation that she wasn't going to make it.
Yeah.
Even from the beginning, because I had some dreams way back when she was a child. But the moment they told me, I just recognized that was what it was. But certainly, if I felt like I could pray, and so my prayer wasn't God save her. Okay. But like when you said that, my idea was that, well, you know what, if I could pray for anything that I would want, then it would be, God save her.
Sure, yeah.
But that couldn't be my prayer then.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what I'm saying now, but just when you said that, it was like, my prayer now has to be more, for acceptance of Thy will. Whatever, to. I don't know what I'm saying, but
Yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, we mature in the form of prayer, you could say, don't we?
Yeah, but I guess what did you say that just like?
Well, I'm saying that you can't force.
You see that you got immediate results.
Yes.
You said
yeah.
that,
but you
but
can't.
It's not a wish list. God isn't Santa Claus.
Yeah. And basically, I think you can't expect an immediate response. It's like Jim Burns said, about this knock and the door will be answered, however that's phrased in some biblical thing. He said, yeah, but you have to wait. It's not going to necessarily be answered. You got to knock and wait. So a prayer for popping out, that may send a message to the inner self, but the inner self or whoever is calling the shots, whatever, could all be a blueprint that's already written. Who knows? You can't force that. So if it's going to happen.
Well, then why pray? What's the purpose of prayer?
Well, it would probably depend, wouldn't it? I think there's a certain phase we go through where it's helpful to admit that we're not the center of the universe, although in a way we are. But it's almost like you have to get to the point of, like the AA folks, where you realize I'm not in control, and like the Rumi poem, whoever brought me here is going to have to take me home. You recognize that there's something bigger than your own mind, your own brain pan or whatever. There's intelligence at work that's bigger than what we believe ourselves to be. And so prayer at that point would be, and so the thing to see is somebody praying to something outside themselves or something inside themselves. What's their feeling about it, And generally we start off as a kid, we'll pray to something outside ourselves. If we mature, it may end up being something inside ourselves. And so like Bernadette Roberts said, she prayed, do you know who that is? Yeah, okay. So she was brought up Catholic, was a nun and stuff like that. And she said when the self disappeared, God also disappeared. So if she had been praying, she was praying to a separate something inside herself, right? And so that would be another level of maturity.
Prayer, when I think of the word solicitation. Trying to solicit something from something.
Well, that would be a form of prayer, wouldn't it? There could also be prayers of gratitude, prayers of complaint. The Zen guy that Richard Rose corresponded with through the mail, Alfred Pullian, he said, if you shake your fist in the air and curse God, he'll do somersaults from being so happy that you recognize he's there, you know? So there could be many forms of prayer. Praying for other people. I found when I first started in different cities where I lived, if there were some people who were interested in self-inquiry, we'd sit in rapport groups. And I found sitting in rapport group with a few friends, say every week, became a regular kind of thing. The first thing that my mind would do when I'd sit down was pray that the other people found what they're looking for. It shocked me because the focus wasn't on myself for that moment, you know. It was.
And yet you're praying to something.
Sure.
For something.
Sure.
Knowing that you have no control over whether or not this something does what you prefer or not.
Yeah.
So why do
Why not?
it?
So doing it, not doing it, that's all going to be part of life experience, isn't it? And so to me, it's the life experience that is relevant. You say, Ken?
In 75, when the economy was down, we just bought a house 6 months earlier, had 2 little girls, and I make a long story short, I was out of work 6 months.
Uh-huh.
And we were down to $600 in savings. And I can't tell you how terrified I was.
I'll bet. Yeah.
Because I didn't know anything about operating a crane. I wasn't a bricklayer, I wasn't all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I never actually expressed this to anybody, but I was frozen in terror. I don't know if anybody experienced that, but it's so terrifying that I was paralyzed. And one evening, out of desperation, at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the fall, I walked up the road to the high school, and I went in the backyard of the field, and I screamed at God. I said, you better not call me now, Jesus. I'll never call you again.
I do that with my computer all the time.
I was screaming. I was absolutely screaming. And I collapsed in tears.
Yeah.
I fell on the floor. I went home, and I was wasted. I sat in a chair, something I never thought. I picked up the newspaper, and I went to the jobs and opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
I saw an advertisement for frames and pictures. And the manufacturer was having a major sale.
Huh.
Long story short, I went down there and told him I had $600 and out of work, I don't know what to do with all this stuff. He said, take 50% off of what's already marked 50% off. I went to the flea market in 2 years, I put that business up to $200,000.
Huh.
And it was prayer, but it was like, you got it. Something's got, I said, I can't, I've got as far as I can go.
Yeah.
You know, if you really exist, I mean, really, you know, you got to scream it.
Mm-hmm.
And this just occurred.
Yep.
And that, so
And to me, all of that is extremely useful data in our database for the intuition to work with. Mm-hmm.
I still believe in prayer. I do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not a praying crusade.
Mm-hmm. Rose used to say, if you pray deeply enough and listen, you will respond. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if I got any more irritation here or not for you. Let's see. Is everybody ready for a break?